A remote, throaty snarl of elephants, and the random blare, drifted above the heavy display of luxuriant trees and dried scrub herb. The near telephone call were neighboring, the furthest a mi or more than off, though was the big flock we had been looking to. Monitoring callers had pinpointed them at sunrise, but these elephants go rapidly, and following centuries of hunt, run if they view, or the odor, humans. The gunman rangers of the Mamba 2 quick response crew blown out front to the leftward and the law, not needing to surprise party, or be amazed by, a lonely pet. They with emotion beckoned us to pursue them slow and thoroughly in a clot chapter of trees. It had been a 3-hour flying in a little aircraft, of Chad's Equity, N'Djamena, to Zakuma Domestic Garden, and a 3-hour driving to the chapter in searching of the flock, the recent of the garden's elephants. Tens of thousands one day lived in the backup cover 3,800 sq kilometers, 1,470 sq miles, but for centuries it was the near location Sudan horsemen could discover elephant ivory, lot desired by Arabic traders on the Nile. Initially they pursued in spears and drawn swords, but contemporary AK-47 attack rifles permitted murder on an industry scope. Janjaweed mercenaries of Darfur, in West Sudan, go on to be the largest poachers risk, in hard gunman, war-trained raiding parties on horseback targeting the jumbo herds for their tusks. Zakuma has lost 90% of the 22,000 elephants it had in the medium 1970s. War in Libya and the growth in consumer demand for elephant ivory diminished the people to 4,300 by the previous 2000s, and the havoc of civilian war cut how to less than rather than 500 by 2010. Rangers were creature annihilated, animals massacred in big groups, and it looked as if Zakuma's elephants were headed to death. But in the history few year, an wonderful conversion has undertaken location. In less than rather than a 10 years a individual, non-profit organization has rotated its fortunes about. African Parks manages several of the hardest to defend parks on the mainland, and in Zakuma, at low, it has done unbelievable advance. We include rangers, and due to the risk how they person, they are war-learned, says Zakuma Garden Officer Leon Lamprecht. Yet they are eventually making law coercion and not war operative. We are hard to halt poaching up, they murder the holdings how we defend. African Parks telephone call which it does delegate control in association in governments and regional communities. It manages 13 secured areas in 9 countries at the invite of governments how absence the personnel or asset required to defend their own living nature. Zakuma hasn't loosen jumbo in 18 months, or a wanderer in 5 years, but it was an heavy fight. In 2012, a patrolling of 7 rangers found a poaching camping in the garden, and waited night for them to back. But as they transferred out their night prayers at first lighting, the poaching attacked them. So African Parks entered stringent war-style learning and tactic, to do certainly rangers weren't trapped unexpectedly at the largest sensitive times of day, at sunrise and at twilight. I believe the period militarization of preservation isn't the big period. A superior period is the professionalization of preservation, says the head execution of African Parks, Peter Fernhead. Poaching, he says, are frequently very militarized themselves, are very learned, include machinery how is really easily accessible and don't dwell by any of the laws and regulation of countries. So in procedure to do certainly the implementation of the law coercion feature is made professionally, you got to include really professionally learned human beings, he says. Adum Alam is the sharpshooter in Mamba 2 patrolling. Sames 30, carries a length gun in a view, and is making the job his dad did up. He was annihilated by poaching, while Adum was fair 8. He went via 2 weeks of choice, 8 weeks of main learning and else 4 persons weeks training to fire. He's a really hazardous work, but I loving making he says. It brings in cash to supporting woman and 4 persons family, but he admits it is dangerous. About his waistline he wears 6 skin waist-like straps decorated in continuous, box, skin amulets every comprising a poem of the Quran. All the rangers carry these waragars to defend them of bullets. Such worn out by the Adum Alam's fellow who mends the top caliber gun installed on their car are greater and more than multiple. Chad isn't the at first location. How comes to reason while so off west schedule a safari to see several African living nature. Such someone ve heard of the nation how straddles the Sahara Desert and Center Africa, are more than potential to believe Boko Haram rather than opulence camping. Pond Chad, on the nation's west national borders in Nigeria, Cameroon and Niger, has been poisoned by the Islamic team. But on the east party of Chad, top-end tourists are profitable thousands of dollars overnight to glamp out by linen, look the bird and the living nature, an expertise thing breathtaking, various and brave. A common garden will price African parks everywhere among $1 and on $5 million pound per year fare to hold departure, says Peter Fernhead. In procedure to be capable to see following these parks, the asset necessary, the expenses of fleeing parks and fleeing them correctly, are really top. They are nearly completely funder-funded, in the Europe Association provided an enormous piece of the cash. Engaging upper dollar tourists is the final aim through all the places African parks manages, so they can begin profitable for themselves. But such largest at hazard are frequently poisoned by warfare, or insecurity. Though the nomade desert camping at Zakama, run for the 4 persons dried season months of the year and ordered up 2 year in preliminary, yet pays just a tertiary of its billing. The EU and philanthropists Dong T Fair offer cash to defend the animals, but since of the sustainability and the broad growth a effectively run garden can give. Winner above the regional society is the key to defending it of poaching. Schools include been constructed, and jobs stipulated. Currently, a web of radios has been taking into account to villages external the garden to ensure an previous precautionary framework for the rangers. While you include human beings upcoming out of Sudan, the identical human beings how include devoted the atrocities in a location love Darfur, while they go to poach in Zakama, they're not upcoming on in their us courier and profitable for lodging and meal on the path, says Mr. Fernhead. They rape her, they loot, and at the end of it they poach as so. We ensure safety to human beings residing about the garden. We include a overall foe, and by leveling ourselves in the regional human beings, we are capable to surmount such forces. His departure so how following year African parks will be driving 6 dark rhinos to Zakama of southward Africa, wherever poachers is destructive herds. The government of Chad is as well lucky in the location. Same quantity of animals is growing and house why we solve to mark a new treaty, he's a gain outcome and we are really lucky in he, says Amat Mbodu Mahamat, Chad's environmental secretary. African Parks has been requested to sharply extend the region it manages at Zakama and get above Else Garden in Chad's polar eastern abandon, wherever a uncommon kind of alligator is much vanishing. We must know how the biodiversity conservation is not creature can fare since we wish to see at the animals. Unbalance of the ecological system as well provides a superior lifetime for humans, the secretary adds. In the heavy wood in southern Zakama, the guard of Mamba 2 patrolling whispered for us to hover behind and expect, as we were shut to the flock. It was 11 o'clock, in the sun top and the heat growing, and we were concerned the elephants would be by the tint of the trees, dispersed and out of type in the wood. But suddenly the scenery outdoor up in a broad verdant bandage of marshy pasture among strips of wood, and down there they were, hundreds of them. Zakama is household to one of the largest solitary herds of elephants you can discover everywhere in Africa. Several tore at the luxuriant herb in their trunks and slapped at the water supply, other were slide their enormous frames in the mud and hilly onto their backs. The calves were possessing though more than fun, one was maybe fair a monthly ancient. In 2013 down there was just one jumbo by the age of 3 in Zakama, but now down there are 85. In the breeze at our many faces and the animals ignorant we were down there, it was a magic expertise. 6 years following the garden came by new control, the sum of living nature has tripled, the jumbo people is eventually growing, and the tourists are upcoming. It is a war versus poaching, but poaching are apparently fair. The at first move in a circuit of source use and source production how is a large economical strength through the mainland and globally, says Peter Fernhead. We can sticker the person how might be hauling a flop and survey and jumbo as the poacher, but eventually you are waging a war versus the illicit living nature trading that is a key part of the more economical scourges how we person as humanists on the earth.